In my opinion, good exercise and a healthy diet are important for a long life. I believe that many jobs are more suited to men. Personally, I think that many jobs are still more suited to men. I feel that the gap between rich and poor is growing. I find Indian food a bit too spicy.
If you want to give an opinion that something is not true with I think, I feel, or I believe, you can say I don't think, I don't believe, I don't feel.
I don't believe there is enough equality between men and women. I don't feel that the gap between rich and poor is getting smaller.
If you are aiming for a very high band, you might consider using some less common ways of expressing an opinion. For example, in informal British English, we can use the expression, I reckon.
I reckon an increasing number of people will be working from home in the future.
If you want to express a very strong opinion in a less common way, you could use the expression, I'm utterly convinced.
I'm utterly convinced that the government should do more to help the unemployed.
Here are some other less common ways of expressing an opinion.
I'm of the opinion that the government should do more to encourage environmentally friendly transport. From my point of view as a student, the cost of living in my city is very high. The way I see it, my country has too many public holidays. Well, I think on the whole, I would prefer to live in a big city. Well, firstly, there are more job opportunities. On top of that, the standard of living is higher and the infrastructure is more developed. Also, there are more places to go shopping. So in short, lots of advantages. On the other hand, I think there are a few important drawbacks worth mentioning. First of all, big cities tend to be more polluted because of all the cars. Secondly, they can be very noisy. What else? Regarding transport, big cities can be very stressful. For example, my country's capital city has a really crowded metro system. In fact, I've heard it's one of the most stressful metro systems in the world. So, yeah, there are lots of disadvantages, but I'd still prefer to live in a city.
Here are some more connectors you can use in your speaking. Use well to introduce a remark or give yourself time to think.
Who is my favorite family member? Well, I need to think about that one.
Use so or therefore to introduce a logical result. Therefore is more formal than so.
Living in a big city has lots of advantages, so I'll prefer to live there.
Use basically to introduce the most important aspect of something and as a conversation filler.
Basically, there are 3 reasons why I'd like to live in a big city.
Don't use it in formal writing, however. Use however or yet to make a contrast.
I agree with that opinion. However, I don't know if it will be true in the future. I agree with that opinion. Yet, I don't know if it will be true in the future.
Though is used to make a contrast, and it normally goes at the end of the sentence.
Living in a big city has lots of advantages. I'd still prefer to live in a small town, though.
Use, in other words, to simplify or summarize what you just said before.
In big cities, there are more offices and shops. In other words, there is more work.
Use if we're talking to introduce a specific aspect of a topic. For example, if the examiner asks you if you prefer living in a big or small city, and you want to talk about one aspect of living in a big city, for example, shopping and entertainment, you can say this.
If we're talking shopping and entertainment, I'd prefer to live in a big city.
You can also use as far as something is concerned, when introducing one aspect of a topic. It is more formal than if we're talking.
As far as shopping is concerned, it is much better to live in a big city than a small town.
You can use eventually when telling a story to say what happens after a long time or after many problems. The meaning is similar to in the end.
We drove for 2 hours trying to find the hotel. Eventually, we gave up and decided to stay at a hostel.
You can use on top of that or what's more to introduce additional points in your argument or story.
The hotel was awful. On top of that, the weather was cold and wet. The hotel was awful. What's more, the weather was cold and wet.
On top of that and what's more are more informal than in addition, furthermore and moreover. So don't use them in formal writing. You can use actually to give an unexpected or surprising response.
Actually, I'm still a student.
You can also use actually to modify a previous statement. For example, if you said something that is slightly inaccurate and you want to be more precise.
I used to get up at 7 a.m. Actually, it was around 6:30.
You can also use in fact as a modifier.
I used to get up at 7 a.m. In fact, it was around 6:30.
If you're aiming for a very high band, you can use the idiom to cut a long story short, when you want to stop telling someone all the details about something that happened and just get to the main facts. In American English, this is to make a long story short.
To cut a long story short, I arrived home after midnight.
Use on the whole or in general to make a general statement.
On the whole, I think the food in my country is healthy. In general, I think the food in my country is healthy.
Use overall to make a final concluding statement.
Overall, it was a fantastic holiday.
Instead of overall, you can also use all in all, on the whole, or all things considered. Use for example or for instance to give an example.
Big cities have better public transport. For instance, in my city there are trams, metro systems, buses and trains.
You can use alternatively to provide an alternative idea.
In my town you can get to the city centre by tram. Alternatively, you can take the bus. Well, I think that watching the right kind of TV programs, for example documentaries, can open your mind and increase your general knowledge. Let me give you an example. Last week, I watched an interesting documentary on Roman history. I learnt a lot about the Roman way of life. I think shopping habits have changed considerably in recent years. Take my hometown as an example. Before the financial crisis, the shops were always full of people. Nowadays, people are tightening their belts and shopping less. Well, I think there are a lot of benefits. When you travel, you meet new people, you learn about new cultures, and you can develop yourself. For example, last summer, my friend went traveling in Africa. She saw how cheerful and happy the people were, despite their difficult situation. She says it made her a more open-minded person. I think that the problem in schools is that teachers focus too much on grammar. I remember when I was at school, I had a nice English teacher, but unfortunately, we had very little speaking practice. What I like about that child is that he is smart and funny. What else? Oh yes, he is also very respectful towards adults. I enjoy taking the bus because it's very relaxing. I can sit and watch the world go by or get lost in my thoughts. So it's a pleasant way to travel. One more thing I would like to add. It's also really convenient because it goes right to my door. I would say football is the most popular sport in my country. Lots of people like watching it on TV. They also enjoy playing it. I'm not sure exactly why. Oh, I just remembered what I wanted to say. I think it's popular because it's really easy to organize a game. You don't need any special equipment.
If you want to get a very high band, you can try using a more idiomatic expression like this.
One more thing springs to mind. It's also really convenient because it goes right to my door.